So good afternoon and welcome to Utku from 4global. Now, as I'm sure many of you are aware, 4global operate the data hub, which LeisureNet uses for all of its platforms. And that was the platform that we used in order to do the post-recovery lockdown survey for the second lockdown. So I have to say thank you very much for your team's support. Without you guys, we wouldn't be able to achieve what we do. As the report is now ready for people to view and have a look at, I just thought I'd take this chance to ask you what you thought were the highlights from the report, from the information that the 33,000 members gave us.
Thank you, Dave. First of all, thanks to LeisureNet. It's been a great service provided by LeisureNet throughout both lockdowns to get the sector ready for what's to come, and also to give them a chance to prepare in the most possible way, in the best possible way, to provide their offer to their customers. So I think it's been invaluable in that sense. I think the second post-lockdown survey has been particularly important in two senses. In the first lockdown, we were in an environment which was unprecedented. No one has been there before, and both the customers and also the businesses have been coming very cold to this, and they had no idea about what's to happen. So people's reactions, people's responses were very much against something they were faced for the first time. Whereas the second post-lockdown survey was conducted in a slightly different environment, because we have been already through one lockdown, so people sort of knew what to come. There has been a process between the two lockdowns where people tested, so to say, the normal life to a certain degree. So people's reactions, people's responses were very interesting to see how things have been changing throughout this period, and how people were preparing to this post-lockdown period. And I think time-wise, it was also a very interesting period of the year for our sector, because the moment the sites reopened was the moment when you usually see the biggest slow turn of this industry towards the end of the year, where people's activity levels either drop or replaced in the gym. And then it will come directly into the period where you see a big spike in the sector, where you have the highest joiners or people picking up activity. So from both timing and the dynamics of the sector perspective, it was a very interesting survey to look at. In terms of the key highlights, I think from the general things that has been discussed before about people, how confident people felt about going to the gym initially, and also their willingness to return were all interesting stats for us. But I'm going to draw the attention into two main areas which we found quite interesting. I think the first one was about age. Because if you look at the different age groups, what was really interesting to see there is how the activity levels have differed for different age groups, and also how this is reflected in the willingness to return to the facility. So what we find really interesting is, amongst the young age groups, these guys have been struggling most to replace the activities that they have been doing in the gym during the lockdown period. So when you look at the older generations, it was much easier for them to replace it either with home workouts or just by walking outside, whereas the younger age groups really struggled to find that alternative activity to get them active, which is directly reflected in their activity levels being about 80% less than what it was originally. Whereas for the older ones, this is only about 65-66%, which is a significant difference. And when you look at their willingness to return to the facility, it is directly reflected in there, because 84% of the youngest age group is ready to go back immediately. Whereas this percentage is about 70 or lower, for 70% or lower as you go to the older age groups. So basically, the younger age groups struggled massively to find an alternative to the gym, and when it opens, they feel very confident to go back. So that was quite an interesting insight that is drawn to. The other one is about the deprivation element. I think you see a similar picture in there from return to facility perspective, because about 77% of the people from deprived areas are ready to go back immediately. But if you look at the lower deprivation areas, this percentage is significantly less. So it's about 5-6% difference in there. And also for people who would never go back, it is a much higher percentage in lower deprivation areas. And some of the work we have done with operators during the between the two lockdown periods justify that, because areas where there has been higher deprivation, what we have seen is those gyms, those leisure centers were able to recover much quicker than the areas with lower deprivation. So I think that age and deprivation dynamics have been pretty interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's also a really interesting gender dynamic in there as well, around when you see the confidence levels from women, for instance. Their initial reaction is actually a little bit more reticent, but once they've visited us, they're much more likely to want to return quicker. So I think there's some really interesting stuff around the operations in there, which is fascinating to look at when you get to see the whole report. And I guess that relates to insight and turning the data into insight and then being able to use that, because we've got to think about how we're promoting activity, who are we promoting that activity, what activities are we promoting? And I guess this insight that you're describing is that piece. So what do you think we should be doing with the insight? How can we maximize the impact?
I think it's always about the right offer to the right people at the right time. And we need to go back to that basic principles of that. And even if we look at just the age group dynamics, and once we realize how the different dynamics work out for different age segments, our offers should reflect that. So what you find in the survey in a very interesting way is basically those young age groups are desperate to go back, and they want to be back in the gym. They haven't really replaced it with other alternative types of activity. So for them, it is really coming to the time of the year where the new joiners will be at the highest rates as usual every year. So are you going to go with a price-driven campaign or with the right offer to bring their friends, etc., to get those people much quicker and to reflect their willingness to return to the facility? Yeah. If you look at the middle-age segments, and by that what I mean is between 35 to actually 60-year-olds, so quite a wide range of group. This is the age group where the alternative activity has been the home workout. So they've been the most responsive ones to find an alternative activity either at home through digital or another way of keeping themselves active. But still, their activity levels have dropped in the second lockdown, which is giving us the insight. If the offer is right and if they are given the right confidence, they will be back. So I think for that group, the key insight is, can you focus on confidence, cleanliness, communication, so to provide the right service to bring these people back and to keep them happy in the leisure center? So that's the second element. If you look at the older adults, they are not the ones who replaced it really with the home workouts or the digital, but that has been more like walking or jogging or sometimes cycling. So alternative ways, but which is primarily driven by social elements as well. And it seems like they are the most difficult ones to bring back from their willingness to return responses as well. So I think here it is the social element that can be a key factor for the operators to focus, but accepting the fact it will take much longer or much more effort to bring these people back.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess that relates in a really good way to the work that you have done around projection modeling, around trying to predict when return rates would be, what the return volumes would be. And from what I saw of the stuff that was presented at UK Active, you were very, very close to those projections. So will you use any of this data that we've created as part of this report as part of that projection modeling?
Yes, most definitely. And even in the first lockdown, our partnership with LeisureNet and the data coming from the confidence survey has been one of the very critical data points for us to understand and model that data. So now with the second lockdown, we are doing a similar exercise, this time with a number of different data points, because we are also taking into account what happened between the two lockdown periods and also the new Comrade survey from Sport England. And from a confidence score perspective, the LeisureNet survey will be right at the center of our modeling as well. We are aiming to go live with the model next week, so we will have the projections between now and end of the March period. So of course, what complicates it more now is the tiering system. So we need to take into account not just the different facility mix or population or deprivation data, but also we are modeling it for the different levels of tiering and restrictions being in place in different ways for that as well. And I think from the survey perspective, but also is quite interesting for us is the impact of the confidence levels on the tiering as well. So where you have different tiers, how the confidence scores are impacted by that. So that will be another key element that is feeding into the projections.
Brilliant. Okay, well, I'll make sure we look out for that. Thank you so much again for your help. And I also have to say a big thank you to ActiveIQ, who sponsored it. And also, of course, the operators, because without them, we don't get access to all of that member data, which is so useful for us from an insight point of view and from you guys from a projection and a modeling point of view. So, okay, thank you for your time. Thank you for your team's time. Take care. And we'll catch up soon. Cheers, mate.
Thank you very much, Dave. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.